So our next session highlights one of the IDE's flagship programs and one that is having a real impact on innovators and workers today, the Inclusive Innovation Challenge. It is a great pleasure to introduce Susan Young, the IDE's Assistant Director and Producer for the Inclusive Innovation Challenge. She's going to share with you a bit about the program, and she'll be introducing one of our past award winners. Susan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us here. The MIT Inclusive Innovation Challenge recognizes, rewards, and promotes entrepreneurial organizations that are using technology to increase economic opportunity for workers around the globe. We've done this for 2 years so far, and through that process have celebrated 40 organizations that are engaged in skills development and opportunity matching, increasing access to technology, creating jobs, growing incomes, and increasing financial inclusion. We're in our 3rd year right now. We're accepting registrations and applications from organizations in 5 different regions. And to tell you a bit more about this year's global tournament approach, which is new to us and we're quite excited about it, we've got a video to show you that will play very shortly.
The 2018 MIT Inclusive Innovation Challenge has launched. The IIC is MIT's premier Future of Work prize. We recognize, reward, and promote entrepreneurial organizations that are using technology to drive economic opportunity for workers. This year, the IIC is expanding its reach with a global tournament by collaborating with partners on 5 continents: North America, Latin America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. We will identify 60 regional finalists that will be celebrated at 5 high-profile events across the globe. 20 winners will be selected to advance at the Global Grand Prize celebration at MIT, where we will award over $1 million during a gala event featuring global tech leaders, policymakers, leading academics, funders, media, and more. Registration deadlines vary by region. Early and growth stage organizations, for profit or nonprofit, from anywhere in the world are encouraged to apply today at mitinclusiveinnovation.com.
So, just to reiterate, registration is now open in 5 of those regions. We're not only seeking applicants, we're seeking judges, we're seeking funding, we're seeking help with outreach. So if you have interest in helping us in this mission, please contact iic@mit.edu and/or come speak to me at the end. I'd love to chat with you at the reception. So to introduce our next speaker, who I'll be chatting with here shortly, there's this idea that the lack of access to credit and to financial services is a data problem. And this is a belief that our next speaker holds very strongly and has found a solution to, which is using non-traditional mobile data signals to create financial identities and to be able to help people gain access to credit and financial services for the first time ever in many of these cases. So our winner in the financial inclusion category from last year was Tala, and the founder and CEO of Tala joins us today, Shivani Siroya. So I'd love to welcome her to the stage and have her tell us how she is reinventing the future of work. So as I mentioned, you're using technology in a very interesting and new way to increase economic inclusion, especially in emerging markets. Tell us when you realized that technology would be part of the solution and just how you got started in general.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's been, getting the award and everything also helped increase our awareness in terms of just getting our mission out there, and so I really appreciate that. But the way that I got started in terms of even finding out about this problem, it really started by understanding the stories of people. And I really think that is the basis behind everything that we do at Tala, because we think of it as, yes, the data that we collect is interesting and useful, and it is how we power all of the work that we're doing, but at the end of the day, it's really the stories and the context of that data that makes it usable for us. And so my background started out working at the UN Population Fund, and I was really interested in working in microfinance, but what I realized is we didn't really understand enough about where this money was actually going in the financial system. And so while I was at the UN Population Fund, I had the opportunity to work on really doing cost-benefit analysis and trying to understand what the outcome of the money actually is. And so we were trying to understand, if we gave someone a $300 loan, where does it go? Does it go towards home improvements, water, sanitation, someone's education? And if we could understand, from where someone started to what, the effect was after the loan in terms of progressing out of poverty, then we could understand how much money to actually put. Obviously did not exist in terms of receipts, credit histories, or any of these things.
I heard you talk one time, you were following people around from the grocery store to their workplace to their house.
Yeah.
You really on the ground doing this.
Yeah, so for about 3.5 years, I ended up traveling across 9 different countries and ended up interviewing a little over 3,500 people. And it was literally like a walking QuickBooks. I would go to their homes in the morning, I would go to work with them, and I would tally how many customers came in, just so that I could actually have accurate data, because it didn't exist. And so when I asked the questions, I would get different responses depending on the time of day, which day of the week it was, because all of this was happening mentally. And so I just sat there and observed. And over time, what I realized, after meeting 3,500 people, one, you start to, in a sense, I think, viscerally believe in people and their stories. And you see it firsthand that these are true consumers and people that are making financial decisions all the time. And so I unconsciously started lending to them. And I actually always thank a friend of mine who came to visit me. I was in Chennai at this point, and he came to visit me, and he asked me this question, and he said, Shivani, when I see, if I see this street, I see 5 tile makers that are all making the exact same product. Why did you decide to lend to this one particular woman, as opposed to all these other people? And I rattled off a few things, and I said, oh, well, it's really easy. She's planning 3 other weddings in her community for other people in the community. She buys her inventory every 3rd Thursday of the month. I said that she's consistently paying her bills on time. She's saving a certain amount of money for her son to take this computer class. And he's like, oh, well, interesting. You're using her daily life to underwrite her. And I was like, that is what I am doing. And it was kind of that moment that just suddenly clicked, which was, I didn't need traditional data. I didn't need her social security number. I did not need these things. What I needed was validated stories about her. And so what I realized is, yes, we need those stories, but what's a scalable form for those stories? And what we know now is that, a lot of that data is sitting right on our devices. And a lot of that data is a lot more behavioral information that you can gather through your interactions with the customer through any medium.
What's an example of maybe a surprising data point that will be part of an algorithm that decides whether somebody should receive a loan or not? One that is kind of, surprising to us.
So I would say that the 3 kind of basic categories of credit scoring is first around identity verification. The second is really understanding a customer's capacity. And then the last piece is really understanding their likelihood to repay, and that's a lot more around character.
Okay.
So in terms of just kind of, if we take those 3 factors, one thing that we found across all of them is really thinking about a customer's anxiety or what are they bringing into a loan application? And are they speeding through it? Are they, looking at multiple places for credit, the time that they're taking into it, things like that. And so we designed our application in such a way that there are these key decision points that a customer has to go through. An example is we can provide a button that says, do you want to edit your application? And what we found is that customers that choose to edit the application, but then also we can say, do you want to review the application once you've edited it? And if they choose to not review, a customer that goes ahead and says, I'm reviewing and then editing is more likely to be not fraudulent, which is obviously, obvious.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the time frame, or the time that they decide to do that in. So a customer that reviews for less than 10 seconds, no matter whether they edit or not, is actually more likely to be fraudulent because they're just showing you that they're not a robot, but they have no real, they're not really editing or reviewing because you can't do that in less than 10 seconds.
And then thinking about from the customer perspective, one thing that we were chatting about a bit before is just how do you design for a customer that is new to financial services like credit? How do you design an app that delivers that? And maybe is, this customer is new to smartphones in general.
So I think there's a lot there, because I think one is that I think when you're designing for a customer that is completely new to smartphones, you have to make it incredibly simple. And so what we're doing is, one, we're bringing in seamless data, but what we're doing is actually showing them the permissions. So we're actually showing you category by category, what is it that we're asking for and why. And so they actually have to give us every single category in piecemeal. So we don't just take everything.
Okay, because that gets to trust, which is something that we've been thinking about today a lot, is there's all this data out there, and your company is built on access to this data. So getting those customers to trust your product, it would be kind of paramount to it being able to even work.
Exactly, because again, what we're doing is providing access, and there's universal demand for access to credit, whether it's people like us or the underserved. And so a lot of times people are willing to give up things for that access, especially the underserved segment. But we took the approach of saying it's actually a data point for us to understand how long does someone actually look at that permission screen? Do they understand what they're actually signing up for? Because then we can actually segment and price more accordingly. So one is, how can we bring it in so that it's simple for the customer? The second is, how can we simplify our questions? And so about 85% of our customers actually go through the loan application in under 2 minutes. And so we're asking only, I would say, about 8 to 10 questions, because we actually realize that it's not about a one-time relationship, but actually it's much more about a long-term relationship with the customer. So rather than asking 50 questions at once, we just want to understand, are you fraudulent? Can we verify your identity? And then from there, can we assess just your initial risk? And then we can actually start to think about what products are best suited for you. The last thing I would say is I go back to the context of the data. And again, thinking about, we work across 5 different countries right now. And so again, yes, there are global fraud models, but again, the data itself on devices and the data you bring in through the app is going to be culturally different. And so I'll give you just an interesting example of understanding context. So in Kenya, for instance, which was one of our first markets, making a phone call at different times of day, the cost of that phone call is different. And so making a phone call at night is actually more expensive than making a phone call during the day. And so if we think about it, that is a proxy, if you think about it, for cash flow or liquidity. Because now a customer who's making the majority of their phone calls, again, we don't care about who you're calling, we care more about the pattern and the decision about how you spend that capital. If you make the majority of your phone calls in the evening, it may tell us that, it can tell us a little bit about the employment that you have, but it tells us a lot more about the fact that you have the capital to be able to make those phone calls at night. And so that could relate to having a higher income. And so that's, again, if we didn't understand that context, that data point wouldn't actually mean anything to us.
And you're learning all of this along the way, right? How long has Tala been around? And also give us a sense of, you said 5 countries, but the number of loans you've given out to people who have never received them before. And then just talk a bit about the economic and other impacts of the loans in the real world.
So we now have over 1.3 million customers on the platform. That's over, I would say, the last 3 years. We as a company have been around for almost 5 years now. And we've now dispersed over 6.5 million loans, a little over 350 million in loan origination.
Wow. Yeah. And then in terms of growth, because you've experienced a ton so far, what do you see for the future in the kind of near and long term, not just opportunities for growth, but what are kind of some of the things you see that you're a little worried about?
I think on the opportunity side, I get really excited because everything that we believe in at Tala is all about radical trust. And we think of this idea as if we can really develop, again, a trust from our side with the customer, but actually also vice versa, then in that way, what you've done is actually unlock something that didn't exist. If you think about financial systems in emerging markets, most countries do not have credit bureaus. Only about 31% of the adult population worldwide is actually in a bureau. So there are billions of people that do not have a credit score or access to formal financial services. And so I always think of it as if we have this kind of trust layer, then from there you can actually build a lot of products on top of that. Because what you have is now a much more holistic financial identity. And so you understand what a customer wants to do with capital, what they need to do, and what they should do. So this is about credit, insurance, savings, it's education, it's health products, but other service providers can actually come onto the platform. I think on the other side, though, the challenge that I really see is that if you don't also educate the customer on this identity and what it can be used for, you're not really enabling them to do anything. In a sense, you've actually created, it's not that they're captive on your platform, but you become the sole provider to them. And so our mission is about access, but it's actually about choice and control. And so we then have to create that pathway so that other providers can use our same identity, but also that the customer can go and actually access other products.
Well, I could keep talking to you and learning from you, and I enjoy doing that off the stage, but unfortunately our time looks like it's up here. So thank you so much for joining us and for telling us about what you're up to, and we can't wait to keep following it.
Thank you.
Thank you.